Anybody know why we have the candles on the table? Okay, I was thinking maybe we're going to give out awards, this little light of mine type of thing. So, I read 1 Corinthians 13, usually a couple of times a year because I perform a couple of weddings a year. I have been looking at it in a non-wedding way, and here are the thoughts that I had. So one of the dilemmas that I run into as an adult is that it's sometimes hard to figure out how to be a better helper to people, and lots of people in ministry need help. Tonight I want to talk just a little bit about how to help someone else based on 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through, I believe it's 1 through 13, and that reads this way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic power and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will too pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, and then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now, faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So what do you suppose is the best way to help someone? It might seem at first blush to be an easy question. You give them what they need. So if you want to help a friend who needs help with the rent, you should give them money. Yeah, there you go. Good. Well, it's an advanced class then. We can move ahead. If you want to help a friend who needs to move their couch, you should give them your truck for the day. Right? Right. If you've got a good back, then you can give them a hand also. Jesus did that kind of giving all the time. He was famous for it. So he would be going along and find himself facing somebody with an obvious problem or an obvious need, and he would just take care of it. He gave people what they needed, especially in the way that he healed them when he saw that they were broken in some physical way. And I'll bet everybody here has done the same thing. If in school someone needs a pencil, you give it to them. When I was in seminary and way over my head academically, there was a group of older students who adopted me and used to give me pages of study notes and highlighted chapters from books for upcoming tests. I never asked for those things. They just came up and began to give them to me early in the first semester and kept it up all 4 years. They knew my circumstance. I was working full-time and taking 18 hours at the master's level, which means I didn't do anything particularly well, and that added up to needing lots of help. I was unwilling to ask for help, so they just took it on themselves to give me what they could as far as they could see what I needed. That is a Jesus thing to do. See a need, if you can fill it, fill the need, and in the doing of those things, you make the person who is receiving feel honored and loved. I know that when they gave me those study aids, it actually caused me to study much harder than I might otherwise have, not because I really wanted to pass the test, but because I really wanted to pass the test and not fail them and make them feel less for having given me help. It isn't always that easy to help somebody. Sometimes we can't afford to get them what they need. Sometimes we're too busy with our own woes to see what they need. And sometimes what they need can only be gotten by them. One of the examples of that kind of situation is addiction. The addict or the alcoholic needs to be sober. That's their first need. And very often the people around them go to great lengths to make that happen. So the sober ones in the family cover up the mistakes that the person makes. They buy them out of the consequence of their actions, and they do everything they can to make their lives easier in the hope that with less pressure on the person, they will be able to quit drinking or drugging. As it turns out, though, that's the exact wrong thing to do. It's kind and loving, and it's done with the best of intentions, but it's not helpful to the addict because it isn't what they need. What they need is for their family and friends to allow them to suffer the consequence of their action. If arrested, don't bail them out. If they are hungover, don't call the boss for them. If they steal from friends or family, have them arrested. All those things need to happen because what an addict really needs is to come to a place where the price for getting high is worse than the thrill that they get from being high. It's almost a mathematical equation. I think that's one of the hardest ways to help someone, to let them suffer for the way that they are being, but it is often the most loving way. Jesus helped people in that way too. He once met up with a lady who had been in a very hard season of life, and when he met her, she was living with a man that she wasn't married to. She had already been in several failed marriages, so she hadn't bothered to marry the latest guy. She was lippy and kind of smart-alecky even to Jesus. So when Jesus met her, she didn't need a physical healing or money. She didn't even need to be told in detail what he thought she should do. She needed just two things. One, Jesus believed that she needed hope. And two, she needed to straighten herself up. Jesus accomplished both those things by telling her first that he was the promised Messiah, and that gave her hope for the future. And then he told her pretty simply that she didn't have any secrets, that he knew all about her life, and he was disappointed in her. And then he left. What I think is that he knew that there was going to be something really powerful about putting her in a place where she had to figure out what and how to change in her own way. It was her choices that had caused the brokenness in her life, and her choices needed to bring healing in her life. His job was to help her by giving her what she needed, but not giving her a bunch of stuff that wouldn't help. So he kept to himself how he thought she should change, and he left her to work on that by herself. I think that is what Jesus would have done with addicts too. He would have let them know they weren't fooling him, and then he would have promised them that with God they could gain sobriety, and then he'd have left it up to them. Not because he wouldn't want to help them or he didn't love them, but because he would know that's the only way to help them. Parents have to decide over and over again whether to intervene with their children's decisions or to let their poor decisions yield a painful but valuable lesson. It must be very hard. No one wants to see their children hurt or to suffer, especially severe consequence. But it really is the best way for a human being to learn. So sometimes the best way to help someone is to wait until the hurting is done and then let them know that you love them and you forgive them and you're willing to go forward with them. I've been thinking about people in my life who have helped me the most. I had my share of adults who thought it was helpful to tell me what was wrong with me in their opinion, but I learned pretty early about what happens to people who cast stones in glass houses. I also learned that when someone came to tell me what I had done wrong or why they thought I was bad, I just lost respect for them. And I often, intentionally, did more of what made them mad just to drive home the message that I was in strong disagreement about what was wrong with me. Sorry, I went away for a while. I will tell you that too much of that kind of attitude has led to some very bad times in my own life. A part of what being a follower of Jesus has helped me to understand is that it's far more powerful to forgive people who hurt my feelings by saying those kinds of things. Then I don't have to pay a higher price, and I don't end up giving more of my time and effort to folks who don't really care about me. Forgiving, as it turns out, is a pretty radical and beautiful way to deal with haters in this life. Now then, how about those who have been helpful? What were they like? I think that of all the teachers who got through and encouraged me, and coaches too, really they all had three things in common. First, I knew by the way that they acted and reacted to me that they liked me. Not because they buttered me up and said nice things just before they lowered the boom and told me what I should change, but because they were always happy to see me and they acted like I was glad I was in their life. Let's see. Second, they actually knew what they were talking about. I take direction better from people who are actually experts in the field or know a whale of a lot better than I do, better than I take direction from people who are taking happy guesses and just assume their superiority. In other words, they shared wisdom from their own well of mistakes and progress. It takes humility to do that, and it also builds hope in other people. I'm always inspired by someone who tells me that they messed up and they had to figure out a better way. And third, they usually gave me very general directions, like Jesus with the woman at the well. Instead of giving me a list of 10 things to do to please them, the people who have really helped me make changes or get better in this life were much more likely to say that they hoped I would try harder, or that they hoped I would have the courage to try again because they believed I could do it. And then, like Jesus, they just let me work it out. Helping people is a very complex thing. But I think in situations where the trouble is more than needing a pencil or some money, it is worth noting that loving them, giving them hope that they can change, and having faith in them to figure it out are the very best things that we can use to help other people. That would be faith, hope, and love. I have heard that before and read it many times, and there does seem to be something to it.